welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show. And we have with us Eddy County Commissioner John Henry, and we're kind of talking around about some of the national issues and how they're affecting the New Mexico issues in the legislative session. And you got your report from Mr. Fanning yesterday. So I wonder how long this session will last, and then at the end of it, how many lawsuits will be raised, regardless of what they do and regardless of what the debate is when it's all said and done. Right. I'm assuming there's going to be some lawsuits that are going to be filed to
There is no telling. It'll be an interesting... I think this will be a fascinating session for those that even aren't nerdy like me and want to watch all the sessions. I think this will be an interesting one to watch, just to see how these things are discussed, because... You know, you were asking about the House seats. One of the maps had it just enough to where Representative Brown and Representative Townsend would now be in the same district. So it's not. I think they know they're not going to get necessarily a Democrat down here, but if you could eliminate one of the good Republicans and make them either run against each other or one of them choose to not run, that would be another way to do it. So they do a lot of these little. And it's hard to prove it's intentional, but that's awfully convenient, some of these lines that are drawn. So I think it'll be an interesting session for people to watch, just to see how government works and see how New Mexico works. Really, this is one of those things that there should be a lot of bipartisan. There should be a lot of discussion on voters, on making sure that you're represented properly. We'll see if that's what they do.
Do you know, from what you've read or seen, are they taking into account, they're just looking at the census numbers, right?
Yeah.
So they're not counting necessarily people that are here legally versus people that are here illegally, or are those numbers included in the census numbers?
I believe it should just be the census numbers. So when they redrew the maps, because we thought Eddy County was going to have a big growth, and it didn't, because right at that time, kind of oil was taking that dip.
Right.
And so a lot of folks that were here were gone. But it's where you live at the time of the census is what should be the number that they're looking at.
Okay. But, and hopefully... U.S. citizens, at least that's my opinion.
Yes, hopefully voting. I mean, the folks that actually are here legally voting and represent the state.
Yeah, because I know in some states they're even passing legislation to allow non-citizens to vote in school board elections and legislative elections. Some states are doing that. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that.
Those states are probably blue.
Massively.
Yeah, so it's a pretty blue thing to do. I mean, when you're losing the argument, you got to go find new voters. So
I guess. Well, and it's really frustrating. And then you see because you talked about the border issues, and Yvette Harrell seems to be the only one of our congressional delegation that's even talking about it. In a right way. And you've got the administration worried about Omicron.
Yeah,
and you mentioned having to show proof of vaccination, to get on a plane, to get off a plane, to come into here, to go into there. But why aren't we doing that with the population that's just flooding across the southern border?
Well, and we wonder why. If you look, our numbers are still pretty high down here, right? With the corona, and what's affecting that? I don't know. But if I'm a guessing guy, I would assume it's thousands of people that have crossed that border that weren't, like you said, now with the president, the new administration, coming out saying, oh, well, to get off a plane, you have to have a negative COVID test. Well, tell them to fly into Mexico and just walk across. Apparently, it's no big deal. And, so, it seems a little interesting that you're so important. It's so important here, but we're completely neglecting it here and just letting folks, whether all the trafficking that's going on there from humans to drugs, it's got to be... we're obviously seeing it. I mean, now drugs are making it even further easier. We've got a major problem. And New Mexico Texas is being very aggressive. They're finishing the wall. They've put millions of dollars towards the border to help shore it up with extra support, extra help.
Well, and we're going to see the same thing happen in New Mexico. I'll use this analogy. I grew up along the Mississippi River in Iowa. And 1965, there was a massive flood that flooded a lot of towns up and down the river. And so starting in 65 and for about 10, 12 years, Corps of Engineers went on a dam building project in communities all along the river. Mm-hmm. And some communities said, we don't want a levee on our waterfront because it'll obstruct the view of our businesses and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody else builds a levee. The water is pushed down, and what happens when it gets to, say, Davenport, Iowa, where they chose not to build a levee?
Right.
That's where all the water went.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with the border. If Texas carries forward and builds a border along the Mexican border there, and Arizona does some things like that, then where is this all going to funnel? It's going to funnel through California. It's going to potentially funnel through here in New Mexico.
No, and I think and the sheriff made that same point. That's exactly. Arizona's trying to do, they're not quite as aggressive as Texas, but they're aggressive. Texas is very aggressive, thank goodness, because that's a big border, obviously, or a big stretch of the border. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, what happens? Well, they're going to come. Why would you take path of least resistance, just like the water, right?
Yeah.
Just walk right through New Mexico, because we're not going to do anything. And there's it sounds heartless, right? And that's not what I'm talking about. There's proper ways to do things, and what we have right now is just it's crazy that we think that no other country does this.
No other
country does this.
Yeah.
And so for us
try to walk from the U.S. into Mexico, and see what happens.
Or Canada,
try
to go. And so are Canada bad people? Well, I would think we agree that probably not. They're supposedly super nice folks. So,
that's what we hear.
Yeah, that's what we hear. I've only been there once, but I remember I had to cross the border to go there, and everything else. So. It's nothing about race. It's nothing about trying to keep immigrants out. That's what none of that is true, but that's what they build it up as. We want to protect the borders and make sure the folks coming through, well, what about the children? They can't prove some of those kids belong to those folks. So what's happening with them?
That's what got Trump in trouble, and the accusations of that, and basically he was cleaning up the Obama-Biden cage mess.
Absolutely,
which
that's still there apparently.
Apparently,
so, where's AOC? She's not down there crying. I don't understand. I mean,
she's more worried about Lauren Boebert right now. She's more concerned about that rep. Well, let's get into the rest of the county commission meeting. You want to kind of give us some highlights there of what you guys discussed yesterday?
Yeah. There was a lot on it, but it was all pretty simple, actually. Josh Mack from Fire Services had a lot of stuff on there yesterday. So a couple of replacements for from brush trucks, some fire trucks. Really glad to see they're focusing on some of their stations. So there was a couple new stations they're trying to get done. One of them out by the sheriff posse, and the reason that one's interesting is because there's a train track kind of right before that. So if there's something happening on the other side, and those apparently are very busy train tracks, they can't get across in time. So having one on that other side will be really beneficial. That's a really busy area. So they're really trying to be strategic in where they're going, strategic in how some of the stuff they bought is some software that they can download that as they're checking equipment, they can log it. So then there's a trail. They can kind of now start monitoring, hey, this truck is X years old. It's had these issues, and we can pull it up and see a report. And so doing a lot of good stuff, kind of like what the roads department did. You got to get a base to figure out where you're at and then go from there. So glad to see they're focusing on that. It doesn't sound super important, but I think it is. The fire hydrant testing, they're going to do 100% testing out in the county. I guess they paint the tops dependent on pressure and all those other things. So they'll have all that done, making sure there's water. That helps with the ISO scores, which helps with the insurance for folks. But I think he had 9 items on there yesterday and really focused on trying to strategically place some stuff. Talked a long time. Our biggest part of the discussion was on the courthouse. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get another judge. I think the caseloads are really large for the current judges, so we're trying to get a 4th judge. I think we've been approved for a 4th judge, if I'm not mistaken. So
where do you put them?
Exactly. And
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, is the Eddy County Courthouse one of the few historically significant original courthouses that are still being used as a functioning courthouse?
What's interesting is, yes, it's a state historical site. what I learned yesterday, and we're going to actually, I had mentioned during the discussion, I said, I'd love to go on a tour of it and understand this more, because somebody said that the original one burned down and they built a new one in, was it the 20s? And then they stuccoed it in the 60s, maybe. My numbers might be wrong, so if y'all are out there butchering me, sorry. But at some point, they stuccoed it. And so, you know, it's from apparently the 20-ish range, the current one we have. So, yeah, it is a historical site, but it's full, really full, obviously. I mean, we've got a lot going on in there. So this was a $2 million look at, okay, if we do all these adjustments, move some rooms around, and that's kind of what we're going to go look at on Friday as well to understand that. We think they could fit a fourth one in there for now. What does that mean long term? I think we're going to have a lot of discussions on that long term to try to understand, with the county continuing to grow, with caseloads continuing to grow. Someone said that some of these cases are up to 2 years. I mean, that's a long time. So we've got to figure out how to get that under control and get those judges what they need. So that'll be an interesting thing. It was a good debate. Came down to a 3-2 vote, which is unusual up lately. Usually it's
the vote was on to do the study.
No, the vote was on to go ahead, because regardless, the thought is these renovations can be done much quicker. And even if, let's say, long term, we're going to look at possibly a new courthouse or a new figure out, fill in the blank. That's probably, throw a number out there, they were guessing $30 million. So for this fix, that buys us time to do a proper study to make sure we're doing what we need to do correctly and still get what we need right now.
Which is that fourth judge. So that passed 3-2.
So that passed 3-2. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is going forward.
So you'll go out for bids and for contractors to.
Yeah, and I don't know how much Brian's going to have to bid out. I think that's Friday, kind of when we walk through, because we had all the drawings and all the discussion, but I'm curious to walk through and see how this is going to look.
Right.
In it. So yeah, that was a good discussion, good movement. I guess there's always something had to happen. So
were you part of the 3 or the 2?
I was part of the 2 on this one.
Okay.
And mainly my main reason is not because I don't think the courthouse needs something now. I wanted to personally table it until after Friday. I wanted to walk
after
through
you
it.
had the tour.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to walk through it and really understand, because it's hard to make a decision when we're not the ones dealing with the problems, right? So, I don't know, the sheriff might be at this tour to help us understand security. The warden might be there to help us understand how that works. I'm hoping we are able to talk to a judge or somebody, a district attorney, somebody to show us there. I want to understand how does this decision affect day-to-day operations and everything else. So it's not that I was against it. I wanted a timing difference is what I was looking for.
Well, you got voted down.
Yeah, it happens. So,
But you're going to be on the tour Friday.
I will be on the tour Friday and excited to see it, to walk through it. Thankfully, I've never been invited to have to appear, so that's good. But I know there's a lot of stuff, even for those that have been in the courthouse. There's so much more in the whole building that I'm sure we don't get to see. So anxious to see that, anxious to understand the issues that Brian deals with on a daily basis, trying to keep it operational. It was a year or 2 ago, was the roof. We spent lots of money on the roof because we had water problems. We've had AC problems. It's an old building, and just trying to keep it running. So excited for that. But like I said, that was really the big discussion. We've reallocated some money. We're trying to get a West Loop project started. A lot of what we're having to do, the current loop we're working on, we're kind of waiting on the state for their intersection, and they've pushed their intersection back like a year. So rather than tie this money up, we might divert it to that West Loop and get that done. So then when the state gets their intersection done, we can tie in with that at that time. So just making sure that rather than sitting and waiting, we're being productive and active. We've got lots of projects, so I don't think any of us are interested in having money sit when we've got projects that have to get done. So I was glad to see Jason Burns doing that and making some movement. Talking about the landfill, he's getting another dump trailer. When he was hired, and he was hired over a year ago, 2 years ago almost, they were saying to dump were hours. You would be stuck in line for hours. And now my understanding is you go out to the landfill, it's immediate. You're in and out, in and out, in and out. So the stuff he's doing, this kind of equipment that he's buying is really making a difference for the folks out there instead of sitting in line, which then helps because rather than having people, forget it, just dump it on the side of the road.
Right.
You know, if you can get in and out and it's easy, you're more likely to do it, you know.
Right.
A lot of things we adjusted is used to they wouldn't take tires. My argument's always been, well, what happens if we don't take them? They throw them on the side of the road. Do we pick them up? Yeah.
Well, what do we do with them?
So we just make an extra step. We've got to go find them, pick them up, and just let's do it. And so we've started doing that. And so they've made it a lot easier. So if you have trash, there's no reason to throw it on the side of the road. It's easy, it's convenient, and they're taking it. So go throw your stuff away.
That'd be great. I saw a water heater in a city dumpster the other day.
Oh.
And I'm like, why?
Exactly.
They go to the transfer station here in town if you're a city resident. And, and if you're in the county, you've got
You got lots of transfer stations to throw them in.
Around. Yeah.
So we have tried to make it as convenient as possible. There's absolutely no excuse to throw your trash out anywhere else. I mean, we've put new convenience stations everywhere. We've made it the one it's two of them in Carlsbad, and I don't know, are 7 days a week trying to help out. I mean, whatever we can do for y'all to throw the trash away, please do it and quit. You know, because my father-in-law, it was interesting. I've never thought about it, but those ditches, especially in Carlsbad, you know, we don't use ditches here as much, but to water their fields, they run that water down the ditch. Well, these folks are throwing trash in the ditch. Well, when that water hits it, now all of a sudden the farmer has all your trash throughout their farm. Yep. And that's just no good.
That's not good. County Commissioner John Henry, we're at the end of the hour. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.